It's not about what you have. It's about who you have. It's not about where you live. It's about how you live. And it's not about what you do. It's about why you do it. Welcome to the Momentasize Podcast. Today, I have got a true ground-up couple on here. They're called the New Build Couple on Instagram. Natalie and Rob. They've built over $9 million worth of real estate. 26 doors is what they hold right now. Without further ado, please welcome Natalie to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I've been able to follow you on Instagram for quite some time, watch you guys build what you're doing. Love what you guys are doing. But for those of the listeners who don't know who you are, just give us a little background, a little origin.
Yeah, so we're from Canada. We are French-Canadian. I'm sorry if the French accent comes through today. I'll do my best to tame it. My husband and I studied architecture. We met in college, and he's from a small town up north, and we met here in Ottawa, and when we graduated from college, we had bought just like a basement unit condo, and we weren't very happy living in a condo, so we decided to do something else. And my parents told us about how you can build your own house with no equity, with sweat equity, really. And so you don't need any money down. You just go, you build, you do a lot of work yourself. And so we did that. We built our house. We added a basement unit apartment for extra income. And then we just sort of realized that this could be a special recipe for a business. And so we got into real estate investing. We built another and another and another, and we kept going. And it was only after like the second or third build, they were like, oh wait, we're investing in real estate. This is what we're actually doing. We didn't really know. We were 20 years old when we started. So we were young, but so today we hold $9 million of real estate. We've built over, I think 35-ish units, but we've sold some in the last couple of years to kind of sort through our portfolio and, prepare for if there was a crash or whatever. We sold the less cash flowing properties. Right now we're building a triplex.
Boom. I love it. Well, there's a lot to unpack right there. One, congratulations on all this success. I can tell it's just the beginning as well. But let's start, I want to unpack really quickly. You were 20 years old when you did your first build, and you said you did it with no equity in. Is that correct? Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah, so it's called, here in Canada, it's called an auto construction loan. And I believe in the States, it's called a build to permanent. So basically, essentially what it means is that you're going to design your house, you're going to have them appraised, and then you're going to bring them to the bank, and the bank's going to say, okay, well, we're able to lend you for hopefully 80% of that value, maybe a little less depending on your financial situation, depending on the interest rates and the debt to income ratio and all that fun stuff. But if you're able to get 80%, that's awesome. And really what it comes down to is that you need to get in there, do some work yourself, DIY it so you can save money and basically save that 20%. So they'll give you, in draws and progressive draws, they'll give you like 100,000 here, whatever, until you're done. And then at the end of it, if you have all your money and you're done your construction, means it didn't cost you a cent. Well, that's great. It means you saved a lot of money. And worst case, maybe you have to, unload maybe a few $1,000s if it costs you a little bit more. That's what we did. And at the end of it, especially when we added the basement apartment, we turned out that we had like a $40,000 HELOC to the property because we had added value with adding that basement unit, right? So we took that HELOC and then we kept going.
Yeah. So you were 20 years old, and in your first build, you both created about 20% of you were planning for about 20% original equity. That's what I love about the ground up game, right? If you go and buy something that's already finished, the equity that you're not going to be able to create much equity unless it's a huge remodel or you're doing an addition. It's just going to take more time. The ground up game, because you're buying a land and you're really improving it, there's usually quite a bit of equity. So it's a great move there. But you were able to do 20% equity plus, because you added that basement unit, you were getting rental income. And on top, you were also able to add another 40 grand of a HELOC. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So no, you're right. It's super hard to find property built-in equity in already built property. It's very, very hard, especially here in Ontario. House prices are incredibly high. So it's very hard just to go off of MLS, find a deal. And like you said, unless you have to do extensive renovations to it, but then that can take longer than just a normal build. Like our house took 4 months to build. You can do a major renovation in 4 months, but then you have all these surprises of, oh, we didn't account for this. You're pulling out drywall. You're noticing all these structural issues. So we prefer new construction. Plus, I think the value of a new construction from the start is higher than something that's older, right? Because it's newer. So I think that there's just a lot of benefits to the strategy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just the lifetime of your building is longer, right? Exactly like you said.
Exactly.
With a new build, if you're gonna hold, which it sounds like a majority of your strategy is to build and hold. You have a build and hold strategy outside of liquidating a few to get some more cash to build some more. But when you have a new building, right, you don't have to worry about all the things that you might have to fix 5-10 years into it, right? It's just the lifetime of that build is much longer. So we're on the same page for that strategy. What did you have any fears? I mean, you're 20 years old, you just went to architecture school, so you understand the gist of it, but now going and actually jumping into building your first build, did you have fears, or talk to us about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, we had fears. I remember on our first house when the excavator was arriving on site, we had just picked up our $40,000 permit, and the excavator got on site, and Rob literally just turned over and like threw up in the bushes because we were just so nervous about what we were about to do. So like, I get it. And it was a stressful process, right? Like, what are we doing? But we had a lot of help because my dad was in construction. Like, he framed houses. He's always been very manual. And so he helped us. He actually built his own house. They built 4 houses before they had my sister and I. So this was, whatever, how many years ago. And then they built my sister's house before ours. And then when we started, they're like, oh, well, we're going to help build yours too. But we wanted to kind of take the reins on a little bit more, but they did guide us, which was great. And I always tell people, yes, we were lucky because we had that help. Not everybody might have that close help, but you can usually find that help. You can hire a builder or just offer to work for a builder. And even if you do it for just a year, or you can pay a fee and you can learn from someone. And that's kind of how you remove that fear, because it is a complex strategy and it is scary to start with.
Exactly. I say the exact same thing, right? Like, if you don't have the built-in infrastructure, if you don't have somebody that's going to be able to mentor you, then just go and spend the, call it 10 to 15% you'd have to pay a general contractor, and then just really be there, right? Be there every day. Because when you watch it one time, it's not rocket science. If you have a growth mindset and you really want to learn and you're invested in learning, you just have to watch it go through the process one time, and then you'll be able to repeat it. Now, though, you'll have your own mistakes when you really go out and do it 100% on your own, but pay that, like you said, hire a builder, and then just be really, really intentional. Be there for every scope. Ask every question. Study the plans like mad so you can start to learn. Initially, it's like a foreign language, but step by step, as you see it come to life, it starts to click, and then one day, boom, it all comes together, and you'll feel comfortable doing it on your own.
Yeah, and I always say you just have to have some logic, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, like some inspectors and stuff, they're very by the book. And so they'll follow the code. And if it's not exactly like the code is written, they won't pass inspection. But construction, you just need logic. If it makes sense, if it's not exactly like the code written, but it still makes sense, just pass it, right? But it's the same thing as the builder. You have to have logic. Think of it like on a logical scale, and you should be able to get through any sort of encounter that you'll face.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I always think like solve problems logically, and then if you have street smarts, use street smarts to go and get the deal, and then solve all the problems that come your way logically, and I think you have a good formula. What about, so you had a little bit of fear of like the actual technical construction side, but you had some support. What about the financials, the numbers? I mean, your husband Rob threw up, so that's a pretty good sign of feeling a certain way but doing it anyways. How did you guys figure out the numbers? Like, how did you know if it was actually going to work? How did you value the land? What was that for somebody who's trying to figure this out? What was that like? How did you overcome that? Talk to us about that.
I don't know if I remember all the fear behind that first deal. I think the fear came when we did our second deal. Okay. Like, for some reason, because this was our own home, I don't know why it didn't feel as scary. Obviously it did, but because we had the appraisal done, we had the report in, we knew what our numbers were going to be. It made sense. We were just I think the fear came with being extremely frugal, right? We were just super cheap, like, the cheapest flooring, the cheapest whatever. Like, we got baths and showers and sinks from like a remodel job that my dad was doing. The guys were ripping it out, putting in new modern stuff, and we took the old stuff, right? So we were stressed about the budget, but at the same time, it was kind of fun because it was our own thing. Like, we had room to screw up, if you will. Whereas the second one, it was like all of a sudden we had something to lose. because we were using the HELOC on our home, and it's like, okay, well, now we love our home, we don't want to lose the home, and what are we really going to take this risk in building another one? Like, do we really need to do this when we have good jobs that we can just keep doing the 9 to 5 thing? So I think the fear came later, but it was still definitely there.
Yeah, unpack that one for me. So I understand exactly why the fear on the first one wasn't there, because you're like, hey, this is our primary home. Essentially our exit strategies. We're not trying to sell this. We're moving into it. We have this ADU, the secondary unit that'll rent, help us out a little bit. Okay, this is our primary. We're good. Fear was making sure you don't go over budget. And I love that you guys made it happen. It takes what it takes, right? So then you finished the first one, and now you're doing the second one. Talk to us. How did you do the second one? Teach people what you did to be able to unlock capital to do that next build.
Yeah, so the next build, what happened is that we found a lot. It was a very cheap lot in our area. So, I think back in the day, lots were going for maybe 60, 70,000. Now they're like 150 to 200. Yeah. But back then, it was maybe around then. And there was this lot for sale for 30,000. And so we were just looking at it. We were toying with the idea of what we could do. And the reason why it was so cheap is because it had like a big hill. You need to do a slope stability report. You needed a septic. So there's it was kind of a problem lot. Yeah. But we figured that with our background in architecture, we could figure something out. We could design something that fits. And I had I worked as a custom home designer. So in my portfolio of designs, I was able to take something that made sense. I drew it in my software, and I'm like, this would actually fit. And so what we did is that we brought it to the bank. We wanted to do a duplex because, again, more income, it just made sense. We kind of wanted to do the same model we had with our primary residence. So we brought it to the bank, and the bank refused us. So that's where the fear came. The fact that the bank was saying no, and we were still working to get that yes. They refused us based on the fact that the construction cost was high, and we didn't make enough money. Like, we had low paying salary. Well, I guess at that time it was starting salaries, right? I think we made like 30 to 40,000 each. And so they didn't like the fact that technically we needed a bigger down to support the build cost. So we didn't have that down. The 40,000 wasn't enough to cover it. So what we did is we decided to kind of scale back and just do a single family home, but plan for the basement apartment later on. And with that, it lowered the construction costs, and it fit into the criteria to meet that 20% down with the 40,000. So with that, we got approved, but then the fear came from like, okay, well, they refused us once, now they approved, but should we, if the bank said no once, should we really be doing this? Yeah. But yeah, and then I remember I called my mom and I'm like, should we be doing this? And she's like, yeah, I should have done that when I was younger, and I think it's the time to do it. You still don't have much to lose. You don't have kids. I say do it. So, and my mom is my best friend, and I take a lot of, her support for cash. So when she said that, I'm like, all right, let's do this. So we jumped in, and we rented it out as a single family home. And then eventually, when those tenants gave their notice to move out, we converted it into a duplex and refinanced it at that point. So 2 years after, we actually ended up making refinancing and making some money off of it.
Yeah, exactly. Tax-free money. So did you use the original equity in your primary house to buy the lot, or what did you do to buy the actual second lot?
So back then the bank would kind of incorporate the lot cost into the build. So when you're building under your personal names, it is a little easier than when it becomes like commercial. So now that we have X amount of properties and X amount of whatever, then we become commercial, and then that changes the specs of the financing. But back then it was a little bit easier. They would just incorporate it into the build. So basically when you take possession of the land, they would give you the land amount as a first draw, and then you have to keep going, put a little bit of time and money in until you're at a certain point where the next draw is feasible for them. Yeah. And so again, it was a little easier back then than it is now, but that's how we started. Now we buy our land in cash because it's just easier than to go through the financing process.
Yeah, exactly. We do the same thing.
Oh, but sorry, I wanted to add that you do have to, in order to get that lot part of the building loan, you have to promise that you're going to put the shovel in within a year of buying the land. Yeah. So if you say that, okay, from here to next year, I promise that the shovel will be in, then that's how they allocate that lot to be part of the build loan.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of creative ways that you can make it happen, right? We do the same thing where we buy land in cash, but it may not even be cash. We will tap into our home equity line of credit, right?
Yeah.
Which converts into cash. HELOC, home equity line of credit, just so everybody understands, is let's say you own a primary home and either you put a lot down, you put a lot of equity down, 20% down, or you owned it for 5 years, the value's gone up. You can go and get a second line of credit on that equity that you have, and it's essentially access to cash. So you can convert that into cash, go and use that existing house to go and buy land in cash and then do it again. So it's a really smart model. I think that sometimes it's really hard. I remember when I was first buying our first house, it's really hard to even get your head wrapped around how you're going to get this whole thing started. But it's just getting into the first one like you guys did, getting into your first primary, making sure that it had investment potential, which you did because you're able to design from the ground up with that additional ADU. And then that just gets the ball rolling. So pretty amazing what you guys did.
Yeah.
And I love it. So the second one was more fear. Talk to us then, how do you go from, you did your first one, the second one, you're a little more fearful, and now you have 26 units. How did that all happen?
I don't know. I honestly, like, looking back, I don't want to do that again. It was a lot of work.
You got addicted is what happened.
That's what it is. Yeah, exactly. You see the numbers, and we saw another lot while we were building that second one. There was another lot just like a few streets down, again, for a good price. Like, again, we could fit something on there. And then we had that mentality that we thought we had to do single family home to get approved. So we did another single family home, and then another lot came on. And you're right, it was an addiction to just want to keep doing more. And we noticed that, at that point too, I think it was during the third build, that's when we like literally learned that this was real estate investing. And so we had started to learn through podcasts and stuff like that and books, and we're like, okay, this makes sense. And actually during just before that third build, we were finishing this second one, and we had bought the third one, but we hadn't started yet, so we were like in permit phases and stuff. And I remember we were completing that second one, and it was a lot of work. Like, the finishing details at the end of the construction is usually just a lot of work, and it's annoying, really. But I got tired because we were working 40 to 50 hours at our regular job, and then we were going to do this work on the side in evenings and on evenings and weekends. And so I got tired, and I was like, babe, what are we doing? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Let's sell this land. We'll sell it with the permit ready. It'll be worth a little bit more, but like, I just want to work at my job and do my hours, and I don't want to do this anymore. It's too much work. And so I remember he said, okay, let's just book like a quick 5-day getaway trip to like the Dominican Republic or something to just kind of clear our head. We did that, and then that's when during the flight he slipped me the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. He's like, hey babe, you should read this. So I read that book, and by the end of the trip I was like, all right, let's do this, we're doing more. So that kind of flipped the mindset switch where like, okay, like having a 9 to 5 is not always the safest thing. Doing what we're doing is actually really smart, it's really good, so after that I became hooked on reading more books and learning more, and so that's how I overcame the fear, and it did become an addiction, and we ended up loving it, but also still hating it sometimes. It's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Depends on the day. Depends on the moment. It can be a love-hate in the same day. So, yeah, it's definitely not what I like about construction so much. This is what I like about it so much is you can take an idea. So you can look at a piece of land, and you can take an idea, whether it's going to be a duplex, a single family, whatever idea you have for it, a triplex, some apartments. You get to take this piece of land, create an idea for it, then run the numbers to see if it's financially feasible. And if it's financially feasible, then you get to bring it to life every single day. And there's hundreds of hands. There's a lot of minds that come together to design the building. There's hundreds of hands that come on to touch the building. And I'm super attracted to and addicted to watching that process unfold. I love the challenges. Although sometimes I hate them, I also love the challenges that come with it. I love the relationships that you get to build with people over time. And it's addicting to be able to go through time and watch actual progress, right? Go from the foundation to the framing to your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, to watch it come to life. It's really rewarding. So
yeah, to create something out of nothing, really. That's what's rewarding about it. And when the times get tough, it's all about, it just reminds you that, okay, my systems in place maybe aren't as up to scale as I need them to be, right? So that's when you just have to create systems and make sure you hire people and whatever, and you make sure that whatever this tough lesson was, or this this burden that we had to go through, whatever this challenge, okay, how do we not repeat this on the next one, right? So you just have to constantly learn and grow your business to adapt to those whatever circumstances are. But yeah, it is fun to build something tangible out of nothing.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about those systems, about, you know, some of the lessons you learned over time and some of the systems you've implemented to not have those happen again. Teach us about those.
So in construction, we don't have a very clear system, to be honest. Like we work with Excel sheets and stuff like that. And my husband we just have our trades, like we have our trade lists and stuff and our contacts, but it's very like, it's always the same trades. It's all local people. So we just know, like we have a checklist now that we give to our guy in the office. We tell him, okay, like this is a new project. So you follow this checklist. This is what we need to do to get things started. So he'll call like you need to get a toilet on site. You need to get the fencing, you need to get whatever, XYZ. So he'll follow that checklist, he'll get everything set up. And then from there, when it comes to actual like project managing, that's mostly my husband who takes care of it. I think that the best thing that we've done so far is just to hire someone on site full time that helps Rob. So Rob can scale back a lot and just basically be there to give orders if you want, and just kind of manage the site, which is what needs to be done. And then we've got our labor doing a lot of work, and he loves it. And then we've got our guy in the office too that not only manages that part of like the admin work, but he also manages the tenants, right? So we still keep our tenant management in-house. We have like Buildium, which is a management software, a tenant management software. But yeah, just hiring people was definitely the best thing we could have done. And then we're giving them, we're sort of handing them the task of creating systems, right? So now that you're hired, okay, this is what you do. Now, what could you do to improve your task so that it becomes easier, and so that, creating SOPs, so standard operating procedures. Like I just literally just told my guy this week or last week, I'm like, I had started this a few years ago. On your spare time, update these, like take screenshots of your process of what you're doing, and make sure that if ever you leave the job and someone else comes in, that it's easy for them to just pick up that manual and keep going from there. So that's super important. But I don't like, we tried to, we were going to buy a project management software to help with the construction and the phases, and it was just a little too fancy for us. We're not that fancy, and Rob was just like, he's very old school, it's all in his head, and so he just wanted to do it himself, and so we didn't do that software. But I'm slowly getting him to put whatever's in his mind on a checklist and in an SOP form, right? So it's a work in progress.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's when you're building any business, right? You go from having your W-2, if I'm correct, this is I at least understand where you guys are at. You had your W-2, you're working your 50 hours on your W-2, and then at nights and weekends, you're grinding through, getting everything going, wearing every single hat, from design, setting up everything, clean up the whole shebang, right? You're doing it all. Then as you get some more success over time, it sounds like, are you guys still working in your W-2s now? Or are you completely done?
So we're completely done. My husband left when in 2018. So he left pretty early on, and then I left. Well, I got pregnant, and then I just didn't go back.
Good for you.
So this was 2-3 years ago.
Yeah. So then you elevate from, hey, we've got enough going on now in our real estate investing in our business, to, hey, we're gonna stop our W-2 because we got good income coming in. And was it just you and Rob initially grinding through it? When was your first, then your first hire comes on, right? Sounds like you've got, how many employees do you have now?
We just have 2. So the first full-time site employee came on when I got pregnant, because I was still going to help Rob on site. And then when I got pregnant, I couldn't do that anymore. So Rob was like, okay, I need to hire someone. And so we were really reluctant about it. But then once he came on, we were like, why didn't we do this before? Like anyway, so that was a huge, this was almost 3 years ago now that he started. And so we hired someone in the office just this year, in January of this year. So that was a big game changer too. So the more I'm hiring, the more I'm seeing how it grows the business and it affects the business on such a positive scale, right?
Yep, 100%. And then like you just said, and now you've got the employees joined, and so now it's starting to think about, how do we get what's out of our head into a process so that it can be consistent, simple, but doing that that is a massive effort. We're on the tail end of going through that right now. And it is like, for entrepreneurs to put a system in place is like one of the worst things you could ask them to do. So it's definitely, I understand where Rob's coming from. I understand where you guys are coming from. And it's super exciting to watch you guys be able to grow. Like I said at the beginning, I think it's just the very beginning of where you guys are going. So you got 26 units. You know, somebody that looks at that and says like, wow, what a journey that's been, you know, great, that all sounds good. But Natalie, you guys were in architecture, so you already understood it. A lot of the fear goes away. What do you say to somebody like that who maybe isn't in architecture, still wants to get into the game? What are some of the things you would say to somebody that's thinking that?
Well, you know what? Even though we studied architecture, I wouldn't say that like we were in no way a pro, right? Because when you study architecture, it kind of goes back to like the inspector thing. You don't have hands-on experience. You're just learning through textbook, through, you know, drafting. And so it was very different going in and actually doing the work. So I think that even though we did have some of that experience, we still came very green. So I think that for someone who has zero experience, it's not a bad idea if you can get some experience under your belt. If, like I said, if you can try to work maybe for a builder. So the guy that we hired to work for us full time, that's exactly what he was doing. So he was, I think, 19 when he started with us, and he just wanted to invest in real estate like we did. He loved what we were doing. And so he heard me through a podcast, and he contacted me and said, you know, are you looking to hire someone? I think I had put an ad that we were looking to hire someone, and he just caught that ad. And so he sent us a message right away, and we hired him. And that was his goal. It was just to learn through us and see how he could implement that later, right? So he's still looking at doing his first deal. He hasn't started yet, but that would be the best thing. I think that that's the best way to learn, through someone else that's actually doing it, but getting that hands-on experience is the best way. Worst case, I mean, you can just buy a property and figure it out on your own. A lot of people did that too. They had no experience. They bought something. They just started building and figured it out, right? I mean, it's maybe not the wisest choice, but it worked for them.
Yeah, it's like jump off the cliff, you learn how to fly. I say that quite a bit because that's majority of the time, that's just what we got to do. I agree. I couldn't agree more with you, right? If you want to do something, find whoever, like it's always in your area, find whoever is doing what you want to be doing, and then find a way to provide value to them, whether that's going and working for them, you know, just find a way to build a relationship and add value to their life. Take something off their plate so that you can gain the knowledge. And, you know, you'll be surprised what happens as you continue to just build relationships. There's a great book called The Go Giver. You know, it's one of my favorite books, super short read, and talks all about that, right? Just be willing to give, and that's where you'll get. So I think that it's a super, super good piece of advice. My hat's tipped to that 19-year-old man who joined your company, because that's the smart way to do it, right? He wanted something and he went for it. Let's pivot a little bit, because you said, you to find even this young man, this 19-year-old young man, you had posted something on social media or done a podcast. Talk to us about your social media story, why you're on social media, the branding, what value you put on it. Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, when we started my Instagram page, it was mostly just posting like here and there our builds, and it was just for fun. It was for friends and family. And then eventually someone through our social media, or it was like a friend of a friend, anyways, he called us and he's like, I have land for sale, or do you want it? And it was a really good deal. And so we bought the land, and then that's when we realized, okay, social media has its powers, right? So it was through that they contacted us, and we got this amazing deal. So there was a few referrals of lots that we bought like that. And so I just kept growing it, posting more. And eventually it just, it grew more and more here and there. But yeah, and then eventually I decided, well, okay, I was getting all these questions, right? People want to learn how to do it and all that. So I, for a couple of years about a year before I had my son, I started working on his book. And then it was just like a short, quick ebook. And then when I had my son, got busy, stopped working on the book. And then eventually I sat down and I completed it. So I wrote this ebook on how the build and hold strategy, that I call it. It's basically like the BRRRR 2.0. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the BRRRR strategy, right? Buy, rent, renovate, refinance, and repeat. So the BRRRR 2.0 that I call it is basically the same thing, except it's build, rent, refinance, and repeat. So there's one less R in there. But I talk a lot about that in my book. And so I just want to help people kind of understand, because when I would listen to podcasts, I would find that Well, first of all, I would get shiny object syndrome. People were always talking about a whole bunch of different strategies. I would want to try everything. But when I would try to listen to podcasts about construction, I would find that it always sounded very complex. Like the guys or whoever was talking on the subject made it sound very complicated. And so I was like, well, in my head, it's not that complicated. And I mean, I'm just going to put it in simple terms of how I understand it. So that book kind of helps a lot of people. There's a few people that reached out that they're like, oh, I bought your book and now I bought my first piece of land and I'm doing my first construction. So that's an amazing feeling. So I really want to hope and to keep growing that. I've also started selling some of our floor plans, like our designs and stuff, on social media, because I get messages constantly, people wanting to just build the same thing. They don't want to go through the whole design process from scratch. So we have I guess that knowledge of like how to build a multifamily or a small multifamily that's budget friendly, that you think about the construction and how it's going to bring the most ROI out of it, right? So yeah, I guess I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, I mean, there is a ton of power in building a personal brand and getting out on social media, and it's, you can see exactly the benefits once you start to do that and put yourself out there and provide great information for people, right? A bunch of different options are created. I mean, even this conversation would never happen if it wasn't for social media, right? And I'm already learning a ton of things just from connecting with you. So it's a beautiful thing, and I think that yes, it can be a distraction if you're over consuming social media. There's definitely a downside to social media, kind of like the shiny object syndrome too. If you might be listening to all these podcasts but never taking action, there's downsides to these things if you're what I would call overall wasting time. But there's also upsides if you're digesting information and then putting it into massive action. It's a huge blessing. So it's for me, we were for like 5-6 years I was like, this social media is a distraction, it's a distraction, and then finally someone's like, if you have a business and you don't have social media, like, what are you doing? And then it broke, like shattered a glass for me, and we're chipping away at it since then. Talk to us. You hit on something. We'll link, by the way, anyone who's listening, we will link to the resources that Natalie has for both her book, for her floor plans. That'll be linked in the podcast. So just go look in the show notes. Don't worry. We'll get you teed up there, listeners. But talk to us a little bit about how to properly design. Like, talk to us about the strategy of why are you doing that, what I would call like mid-size multifamily, a little bit under the 2, 3, 4 plexes, 6 plexes. You have a 6-plex coming up as well. Why are you doing that strategy? And then what are some of the ways that you're designing those in a smart way so that you're not way overpaying to build these?
Yeah. So, I mean, the why of it is mostly because that's what we started with, right? We started doing small multi, and so now we're trying to get into bigger multis, but sometimes there's just like the cost to income ratio makes sense with like a 4-plex or a 5-plex or whatever. Whereas when sometimes with a 12 and up, what happens here in Canada, and I think in certain other parts, maybe in the States, the development charges are insanely high. So here, like a 12-plex, your development charges might be $250K. So just that is major. And so sometimes it just makes sense to stay with lower units. And so, like I said, your cost to income makes sense. In terms of, what was your other question? The way to build.
Yeah, some of the ways you design.
Right.
Because that's the key about being in the ground up game. You get to begin with the end in mind and design stuff that makes sense. And like you said, you're designing stuff and floor plans that are cost effective. They still hit all the programming. They're beautiful, but you're thinking about it before, so you don't have these huge construction costs. What are some of the ways you do that?
Yeah, so that's a question I get a lot, and I think that it just comes down to the overall design, right? So you don't want to make something you don't want to design something that has a bunch of checks and jogs in it and a big roof scheme. That's because roofs can be very expensive. So you want to keep your roof and your footprint relatively small, not small, but simple. So it doesn't have to be a box either, although it could be a box and you can add some details to the front to make it look nice. Because I always say whatever is new looks nice, right? But you just want to keep it simple. I always tell people the KISS rule: keep it simple, stupid. Talk to your designer and say, okay, because you can have a designer that's going to just go for the look, right? Like an architect that's going to say, oh, well, this is going to be super nice. And I had a friend, he lives about in Toronto, a few hours from here, and he sent me a 3D elevation of what he was looking to build. And he said, what do you think? And I said, that's going to cost you a crap load just for your roofing, because it was like a loft inside the roof. And so he's like, really? So he had it priced out. out. And then he just came back to me last week. He's like, yeah, you're right. That's ridiculous. So he's redesigning it from scratch. So I always say, if you can sit with your designer and say, okay, this is for a real estate investing, income property. It needs to be simple. It needs to be easy to build, and it needs to, it can't cost an arm and a leg, right? So you need to source like local materials, need to find systems or construction systems that can be built locally, because there's all kinds of construction systems. So whichever your local municipality is the most used to, right? Not just the municipality, but like the local trades, what they're used to doing, follow that. Like you could do ICF construction here, where it's you got your foam insulation, your concrete, and then it's concrete is sandwiched between the foam insulation. That's the gist of it. But it's just so much more expensive. All the trades are not as used to it. They need different tools. They got to drill through the cement and stuff. And so it just basically it's like 30% more adds up to your construction costs. So whatever you can do to keep it's simple, and make sure like stuff like your electrical panel, make sure that it's placed in a convenient spot where it hits like all the kitchens and stuff, because that's where you got your most wires coming out of. Don't place them near the bedrooms if you can, right? So stuff like that. And that's always something that I say, talk to your trades when you're designing, even before you start designing. Like call up, if you know an electrician, call up, say, okay, I'm looking at buying this lot. There's an overhead wiring coming in. How much do you think it's going to cost to do just the electrical connection? And where do you think my meter should be for it to be as cost effective as possible? So he'll give you his recommendations and how much he thinks it's going to cost. And so you can bring that to your designer and say, okay, I've got this type of electrical system going in, make sure that the panels on this side, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of guide your designer through that. I also say, bring your excavator guy on site and say, okay, based on your knowledge and of working in the area before, what kind of soil do you think we have here, and what kind of problems do you anticipate getting, right? So if it's a high water table, then okay, we probably have to bring in soil or bring up the lot. It's going to cost X amount. If it's all glazed, and anyway, so it's all things that by talking to the experts directly, getting their feedback first, start by maybe getting the lot, because it's a lot easier for them to give you that feedback once you actually have a lot in mind, or at least get it under contract. Like you don't have to like put in a conditional offer of getting all those consultations with the municipality too. And then once that's in, then you're able to do an informed decision of how to best build your build.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. My wife and I always get in arguments on like what I would call our entry level builds, like on windows, right? For us here, and it changes where you're at and what type of windows you put in, but if I wanted to put black exterior, white interior windows in, it's going to cost me 20 to 30% more for the window. Yeah. And so I always tell her, hey, same window, same quality. I know that you can figure out how to design a beautiful exterior with a white window, right? So just figure out how to make it look good with a white window instead. And we always get in arguments about that. Another one that we always really think about on the pre-design side is a lot of things, I wouldn't say everything, but a lot of things are bid off square footage, right? So when you have your actual construction drawings, you're going to send it out to your framer. He's going to bid off square footage. Your painter, your drywall guy, your roofer, everyone's going to bid off your lumber. It's all going to come off square footage. So I often pay a lot of attention to, one, my programming, because I need programming meaning 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, right? That's what I mean by programming. We need to make sure we fit the right programming for the area. But if I can get it in 1,600 square feet where it still feels good, everything's nice, rather than 1,800 square feet or 2,000 square feet, if I can save 200 square feet of building material, framing labor, etc., when you look at what that decision does, if it costs in your area $200 per square foot to build and you save yourself 200 square feet of building, you can save yourself 30 to 40 grand right there just in that decision. And as you scale up, it makes even more of a difference, right? We were able to use that same strategy and thinking on our apartments when we did our 84 unit to cut off millions of dollars worth of costs. We cut off 10,500 feet of building we would have to build. We still got 2-bedroom, 2-bath, but rather than in 975 square feet, we did it in 850. So we cut off 125 square feet per building, and it just saves you a ton of money on the front end. So those things, exactly like Natalie said, those things right there, that's what I like about the ground up game too, is you're able to design things the right way. And your budget is really, I always say, like, our budget is created before the construction drawings. Once you have the construction drawings, it's very difficult. You can go up and down with some selections, but like you said, if you have really difficult roof lines or a bunch of jogs in your building, or you've got like bad decision making in just the way that it's designed, you can be in trouble. So
yeah, and you're right. And I always have trouble explaining that to people. Like I always say, I can actually create the quote or like the cost of build beforehand. Like I can fix my budget to what I need it to be. And people are like, what? Like, how does that work? Well, first of all, am I going to build a triplex or a sixplex? So right there, I can decide what I'm going to build and then how I'm going to build it. And so, yeah, you're right. Like everything you said, that's exactly how I've always had trouble explaining that to people, that you can create your own budget. Whereas with the renovation, you can't. You have your base cost, you have your renovation cost, and then you have your contingency. Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, you're stuck. And you don't even know, you might have some surprises once you open up those walls. So do you guys
that's the thing.
Do you do any renovations or anything like that? Any flip?
We did once. Yeah. We did one renovation. We called it the Blue Reno. It was a side-by-side duplex, and it was just a good deal and made sense. It wasn't severed, and so we're like, and it just needed a few like cosmetic change. I think we put in about $45,000 in it, and we ended up severing it. So we divided it and we sold off each site. We rented them for about a year or two each, and then we sold off. But we more than doubled what we made on it. We more than doubled our cost, including renovation. So that was our one and only, because like I said, prices here are just so high. It's very difficult to get that deal where you can build an equity. People do it all the time. I just the numbers don't make as much sense to me here as they do with new construction, right? Where I can, like you said, where I can make my own budget with it.
Yeah, and you're fighting, like in fix and flips, you're fighting distressed properties. You're fighting against a lot of other people who know how to fix and flip, right? There's more people who know how to wholesale and fix and flip than there are people who know how to buy a piece of land and build from the ground up. And so you're fighting against, like, sometimes those properties, they're distressed, they seem like a good deal, but next thing you know, everyone's bidding them up, right? And then you have all these surprises and challenges, where if you take the time to learn the ground up game, buy land, build from the ground up, the people that for some reason people aren't as comfortable with that. So if you actually learn that skill, you're going to have less competition. Just like you said, I mean, when you buy your lots, are you having to, like, where are you getting your lots? Where are you sourcing them? Are you having to compete against a lot of people? Talk to us about like where you're finding your properties.
Yeah, so before it was very easy. Like you said, we were one of the only ones that would build for rental income. So then, of course, COVID happened, and all of a sudden everybody was a builder, everybody had money, and so we were fighting against everyone. Yeah. So we still bought some land. We got lucky with a few lots that we bought them through MLS, just a deal that was sitting there. And it was like at the beginning of the pandemic, where I think people were a little bit stressed out about what was going to happen. And so the prices still made sense. So we bought a couple there. And then like a year later, prices just soared and everybody was buying those lots. And I don't know what happened. I think a lot of people because we're in the outskirts of Ottawa. So I think a lot of people from this downtown area came into the outskirts. I think not having to drive into work was a factor now, so people were able to afford to move out of the city, and so maybe that was a factor. But we definitely had to fight, and we still do have to fight. There's a lot more builders than there were before, but we make those other builders our friends. They're all friends of ours. We know what everybody's doing in the area. We help each other out, and it has a lot of benefits to it, right? We're not gonna like treat them as competition and not talk to them, because that doesn't help anyone. So we help each other, and it has slowed down since the pandemic ended and since interest rates went up. We just bought the triplex that we're doing now. We were able to get that lot. It was a bank repo, and it was a good deal. We were able to negotiate. It stayed on the market for a few months, and then we negotiated them down, and we scored that one. But all of a sudden it started picking up again. Now people are buying stuff within a week or so. So it's springtime. It's getting busy again. So right now our plan is to do this triplex that we just started. We're framing this week. Then we're going to do our sixplex. It's going to start probably maybe it's September. And then that sixplex is part of like a bigger development project. So it's like a big lot of 2.6 acres or something where we're going to do other builds on it. So we might do like a nineplex and another sixplex later on, like phase 2 and 3. But after this initial sixplex, I kind of want to take a year off. I kind of want to see, because there's just, everybody's jumping into it. Everybody's doing it. So when people are usually doing, I kind of like to take a break and step back and see what's going to happen. Plus, I'm due for a break. I feel like I'm sick of talking about real estate once in a while. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to keep building, but yeah, we'll see. I have a feeling that after the sixplex, I'm going to be...
Dominican is what you need.
Yeah, probably. Or because I have a feeling that I'm going to take a month off and be like, okay, this deal just came on, let's buy this, and I'm going to keep going. So
yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's smart also when everyone's going, right? Like zig when others zag is a saying for a reason. Talk to us about the deals you're doing right now. You said you're buying the land in cash. How are you guys financing those deals right now?
So a lot of it is financed through like our own money, our own HELOC, line of credits, whatever, because it is a bit of a complex process with the construction loans, like traditional construction loan. But we always do get a construction loan like towards the end. So what happens is that we use a local credit union because it's just easier to deal with them. We've been dealing with them since day one. So they're very flexible. They offer the best terms for construction. The thing is now because the interest rates are so high, the debt to income ratio and all that, you have to have 4-5 units and up in order for the income and the costs to kind of make sense with the interest rates. So right now, like our last triplex that we did, because it was only 3 doors and because we had bought the lot towards the end of the pandemic, it was still a little bit expensive and it was a small, tight lot that we could only do 2-bedroom units. So the amount of rent that we could ask for was kind of capped, right? That if it was like 3 bedrooms and 2 bath units. So that one, it was the first time that we actually had to leave money in the deal. And that pissed me off because I wasn't used to doing that. We always refinanced and pulled out, right? So this one, we're like, okay, so the interest rates are making it harder. And the what happens with that when your debt to income ratio is higher, the bank will give you... So that loan ended up being about 60% of the total value of what they were lending us. And we had to get, you usually have to be at a certain point before they even give you that first draw. So I think we were like 80% complete with the construction before we got our first draw, maybe 70% complete when we got our first draw. So that one was tougher, but so we did that one, with our line of credits and stuff. We do have private investors too, private lenders that we can kind of keep in our back pocket if we want to do that. But we try to do it with our own money because you just pay less interest, but at the same time, it's not the best way to scale. We know this. So yeah, that's how we're doing it right now. The next triplex that we're doing right now we just started, this one is going to be 3 bedrooms, 2 bath units with a garage. So the rent is better. The price for the lot was better. So that one in general will be a better construction loan. We shouldn't have to leave any money in. We might not pull any out, but at least break even right now is our goal. So we'll see for the next one. The sixplex should be better too because there's going to be more units, right? So more income for the cost.
Talk to us about why hold them? What's the strategy on why not sell them, right? That one that you had to cash in refinance, which is happening to a lot of people right now. How come you guys are deciding to hold them? What's the benefit of holding them over the long term? What's the strategy on build and hold rather than build and sell?
Yeah, so we just think that we're focusing on cash flow. We're focusing on keeping as much monthly reoccurring cash flow as possible because I still believe that Canada, I think economic wise is in a worse place than the US, and I think that there's still some harm to come, and so we just want to be prepared to make sure that we have a lot of cash flow that we can sustain whatever's coming. Plus, it's a good thing that we focused on cash flow for so long because in Canada, and I don't know if you know this, because you guys in the States, you can usually lock in an interest rate for like 30 years.
Yeah.
Which blows my mind, by the way. I'm so jealous of that. Here, we don't have that. You can lock in up to 5 years. And sometimes if you're lucky, you can maybe lock in 10. But apparently that's a thing. I've never seen it. So we always lock in 5 years and no more. So we had a bunch of properties that were due for renewal just last year, right, in 2023 when it was the spike of the interest rates. So, but thankfully, because we had always focused on cash flow and low build costs, we were able to sustain those new interest rates and still have a positive cash flow. Like there's one building that has maybe a cash flow of like $500, and that's our lowest one. So everything else cash flows pretty decently. And so we just think that it's the safer route to take right now. And then eventually, you know, if you want to just do nothing or focus on something completely different than real estate, if we want to do like a different type of business completely, well, we know that our business is self-sustained, and you know it's really for the long-term game. However, having said that, we are not opposed to selling. We have sold in the past. I read this book once, and I can talk about that after. I think you asked what books we like, right? I think yeah. So I can talk about that after. But anyways, there's a book I read that kind of helped me gauge the market and gauge our portfolio and figure out where we needed to clean it up a bit. And so the properties that were least cash flowing, we sold them, and we had a good equity in them, so we still made a good profit, but we took that profit and put it into better cash flowing properties. The other reason why is because you guys have 1031 exchange, right? We don't have that. So yeah, when we
you got to move to America then.
Yeah, honestly, seriously thinking about it. So yeah, we don't have 1031 exchange. So when we sell a property, we have to pay taxes on it, and it's a lot, right? So we try not to sell as much as possible, and when we do, we sell like one a year so that we're not taxed a really high percentage every year, right? So that's our strategy. That's our why for doing that.
Do you guys have bonus depreciation or depreciation ability in Canada, or is that also, you guys don't get that benefit?
So yes, like that's a question for my tax guy, my CPA. Yeah. So he takes care of all that. Yes, we can depreciate. I honestly, like, my language and my comprehension of that is very, very low. That's why I hire a guy who takes care of all of it. But yes, he is we have a good tax guy, and I really recommend, if you're getting into construction, get a guy that knows construction, that knows investing, because there's a lot of things, especially here in Canada, there's just a lot of things that you have to watch for. Here too, there's what they call HST rebate on a new construction, so you can get a portion of the tax back on a new construction, but it can be very complex, and when it's for your own property, it's very different to when it's an income property, and you get a little bit less, but it's doable. So get a guy who knows, like, pay good money for a good tax guy, because it definitely comes in handy.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a huge difference, and I think that the overall, when you can look at it as a whole, real estate, why I invest essentially everything we have. I'm like 95% in real estate. We hold some savings, some gold, some silver, but all of what I'm in is real estate. One, because I'm doing it every day, but two, because it's a comprehensive, like, the slow wealth building ability in real estate is unbelievable. You have, when you do ground up, you have built-in equity once you finish the project, right? Which I love. Yeah. You have cash flow, right? Like we talked about, once you have cash flow. You get appreciation, right? Meaning that as you hold that over time, the building appreciates. At the same time, your tenants are paying down your loan, so you're getting amortization, right? So that equity is going to continue to grow. And then you have tax benefits, both in depreciation, whether you just do standard depreciation, or if you use, here in the US, you have stuff like cost segregation studies. You have stuff on, like, larger multifamily where you have energy efficiency rebates that you can get under 79D. So what you can do with those things, and look at it as an overall strategy, you can, if you're smart and you're building, let's say you're making $200,000 a year in your W-2 job, or as a real estate professional, because you have to be licensed you have to be qualified as a real estate professional here. If you're able to then also build, keep and hold, you can, if you do it properly with the right strategy, you could offset that $200,000 that you made completely with that cost segregation. Right now, if you sell or other things happen, you have what's called a depreciation recapture fee. But you can look at, that's what I love about the real estate game, is there's so many strategies that you can execute on. And it's really, like, for a common person, real estate is such a great way to, if you work hard, if you you have the balls to go for it, it's a way that you can really build generational wealth if you stick in it for the long run. I mean, you see it with what you guys did. I mean, to build a $9 million portfolio, with 26 doors, it's a really, really special endeavor. And you started at 20 years old. So my hat's tipped to what you and Rob did there. And, pretty cool.
Thank you. And yeah, you're right, because I know someone who has 90 doors and I think his portfolio is like 15 million. Yeah. So for the number, the difference in the number of doors that person has, and for the difference in net worth or whatever, it's just in the portfolio worth is huge. But it's because he's all doing renovations, right? It's all older property, so he doesn't have that built-in equity. And so yeah, you're right. I think new construction has a lot of benefits that a lot of people are overlooking.
Yeah. Natalie, for somebody who's listening, they agree with us. They like the ground up game. They like the strategy. They like everything you said. They want to build a portfolio for their family, just like you've done. Let's create a very quick next step, massive action. Because it can feel, if you're doing anything that's new, it can feel very intimidating initially, right? It kind of seems foggy at the end. What are some massive action, step 1, step 2, step 3 things that somebody can do if they want to get going?
So I always recommend house hacking, right? So I know that's a big step, but generally I recommend it. So that's what we did. When we built our house, so usually house hacking is when somebody buys a property and then we'll rent out rooms or rent out a basement apartment or whatever. So we built it and then we rented out the basement apartment. So basically what it means is that the income is paying for our mortgage payments. And so I still think that is the absolute best way to get started in new construction, because for one, you get to build your own house. You get to build, you can build your dream home, even though you're on a tight budget. You could still, I still love my house. It's still the same house we live in. It's that one right there, actually. So we still live in this house. I love it. I don't want to move. And we did it cheap, so we might fix some things later on, or we are fixing things a little bit here and there. But I think that it's just a great benefit to be able to kind of design your own house, and then you design it with an income property. With an income unit, and then from there, it gives you at least a history with the bank, right? So at least because the bank really needs, they'll be more hesitant to give a loan to someone who has no construction experience. So if you can have at least one construction under your belt, and it's always easier to get financing when it's for your own property, when it's owner occupied. So it requires less of a down payment. I know you guys have 3.5% down payment loans and stuff. So if you can make that work with a creative broker, it could be a really good head start. And so I think that the best, the first step to do is to go talk to a broker. Start by asking people who are doing this, who are doing new construction, who are not even just doing new construction, people who are investing in real estate in your local market. Ask them who they would recommend as a broker. Find a mortgage broker, that's someone who's creative and who's a shark. So I have a guy that I like to recommend to, he can be a bit of a dick, but that's what you need. He's the guy who knows all the things. And so you can find this guy who can be creative and help you get out of a tough spot if you're in a tough spot financially, and then get your pre-approval for hopefully a new construction house hack. That would be my first step.
Yeah, I love it. I couldn't agree more. Within that house hack, what's the key? Is it a lot of bedrooms? Is it an ADU? Is it buying a plan from you when you're done? What are some of the things when you're thinking about that? I'm going to design a house hack. I agree with you. Let's do it. What should I have in there?
Well, I think it really depends on the market. It depends completely on what sells the best in your area. So is it easier to sell? Because I always like to have the exit strategy on hand. Yeah. So if it's easier to sell something, right, you've got your exit strategy if something goes wrong during construction. So is it a small 2-bedroom bungalow with a garage? Is it a 3-bedroom, 2-bath? Is it so for us it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a garage, but we made it all fit within a 1,500 square foot bungalow, but it was a raised bungalow where we added a basement apartment that had large windows in it, right? So we were able to get a really good amount of rent for it. And so I think that it just really depends on, it can be different for everyone. It can be different for a lot of markets. You could also do a house hack where like a sort of student rental, right? You can almost do that, have a lot of bedrooms. And then if you're like in a college area, you can have a home with a lot of bedrooms and rent out all the bedrooms to students. So that's not something I would recommend for someone to do when they have a family, maybe. But like if you're just a single person, like why not? You can maybe start with that. Or another way too is to do like a triplex. You can start with a triplex maybe if you can get approval of financing for that, or if you can get a private lender, and then rent out the 2 units and you live for free, and probably even you're making money on living there. You're being paid to live there. So there's a few ways to do it. You just have to be conscious of what the needs of your market are, what sells the most, and what would be, I guess, the easiest way to get your feet in the door.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting. All 3 of those strategies, the like buy, let's say build a place that has maybe 4 or 5 bedrooms and you rent by the room in that college area, right? College area, or where rent is high and it's hard, you need to create some affordability. If you can create a situation where you have a 5-bedroom house and it's an area that's a destination town, like where we are, where people can't really rent anything for more than $1,400 if they wanted to get a studio, or even $1,600 to be honest for a studio. Well, now you could create a room for them, $800. You do $800 times 4 rooms because you're going to live in the other one. And right there, you have a pretty good strategy. So I agree. That's a great strategy. Then the ADU strategy, I love that thing for both like just renting it out, but also even like multi-generational side, right? So you could live in it, live in the main house as the family, rent out the ADU, supplement quite a bit of your income. And it can, what's cool about the ground up one is it can still be nice. Like you can build a nice house for your family. If you're like, you have 2 kids, you can build a nice house, like you said, like a 1,500 square foot bungalow with a garage that was raised. Like it's a nice place to live. You're still living in it today is what it sounds like, right? Like you can
exactly.
You can build something nice and still supplement that income. And then I like that so much as an asset because you then have flexibility, as you grow in your real estate investing. Maybe that income isn't as important to you anymore. And now when your parents get older, they can move in, right? It becomes this multi-generational asset as well. And then that triplex house hack is beautiful as well, right? That's where you can have your own unit and then rent out the other 2. When you're ready, you can move out of it. So I agree with you so much. One of those strategies, depending on your market, look at those things and just make it happen, and then be willing to do whatever it takes. I had a buddy who took a garage and framed out a room in the garage, rented all the other rooms in his house, lived in the garage, and that was his start. So, I think that's really, really good advice. If you're in Central Oregon, by the way, and you want to buy one of those, we're building all 3 of those types. So, if you're interested, and we're also happy to just help you literally just find a piece of land and we'll send you all our plans for free. That's just for my Central Oregon listeners. We're doing that actively, both a 4-plex ADU builds and large single family bedroom ones for that exact strategy. So, and they're all for sale actually. Anyways, I couldn't agree more with you on that. Talk to us. We were talking books. Give us your book recommendations. What are your book recommendations? What you got? Can you hear me, Steph?
Sorry, it froze.
Froze up. Let's talk book recommendations. What kind of book recommendations do you have for people as we close this out?
Yes. So do they all have to be real estate related, or can it be?
Give them to me. All the books that impacted you, that you would recommend somebody would read.
I also took a note of The Go-Giver. I had never heard of that one, so I took a note of that one. I'm going to read that too.
It's a good one.
So there's one book that so it's a Canadian book, but I honestly think that even though it's a Canadian title, it can easily be adapted to the States because the fundamentals are the same. It's called The Secrets to the Real Estate Investing Cycle by Don Campbell. And so it's very interesting because it just talks about how to be a more strategic investor and how to notice and adapt to the market cycles. You have to notice that, or you have to understand and acknowledge that real estate comes in cycles, and you have to understand which cycle you're in and what comes next and how to prepare for the next one. So I think that even though it's a Canadian book, the fundamentals are the same whether you're in the States. And that one was a great book. I read it twice, and it was just before the pandemic hit that I read it. So I was very happy. So I was afraid during the pandemic that things were going to crash, which they didn't, but still we had been prepared. We had sold our least cash flowing properties and all that. So that one was a really eye-opening book for me. Another book this has nothing to do with real estate, but I think it can be very helpful to a lot of people. It's called the Panic Attack Workbook. So it's a book about for anybody who has anxiety. So I used to have like really bad anxiety a few years ago. I stopped having. I was able to kind of manage it now, and it's very, very minimal now. I basically only get it when I'm on trips. I love to travel. I live to travel, but sometimes I still get a bit of a little panic attack when I'm far away from home, right? So I started reading that book on Audible, not reading it, listening to it on Audible. And it just basically helps with people who have anxiety and how to kind of face your anxiety and how to talk about it and see that you're not the only one that's dealing with it. You don't have to like repress it and hide it. And anyways, I found it very, very helpful. So I recommend that to anyone who struggles with anxiety. And I think that it's something that a lot of people are dealing with the more and more that we go. I think maybe social media and our phones have something to do with that. But anyways, that's a whole other conversation. So the third book, I think it's just a really good book for anybody who's married. It's the, is it called The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work? It's a very popular book. Yes, I think that's the one. I'm forgetting the title. I have it in my library, but I just think it's a very good book for even if you're not having marital problems. It's just, you're always going to have ups and downs in a marriage. And I think that it's a very good book for anyone to read. It can also help with if you're in business with your partner. It helps with a few things. And I think that it's definitely, I've recommended it to a few couples who are having, their moments, and it's helped them. So I think that's a good book to pick up. Beautiful. Oh, and the fourth book is my book. If you want to pick it up, it's a good book if you want to learn.
Yeah, we'll definitely link to all 4 of them. What's your book called, by the way?
It's the Build and Hold Strategy.
Build and Hold Strategy. So I haven't read any of those books. So I got some reading to do. First one I'm going to buy is the Build and Hold Strategy, though. So that'll be my first.
Awesome.
Cool. I think those are great recommendations. Some reading for me. Anyone that's listening will link those in the notes. Natalie, thank you so much for coming on. It was a great conversation. Like I said, I think that it's just the beginning for you and Rob, whatever you decide. Sounds like you'll take a little bit of time off here when you get through this 3-plex and this next 6-plex and then figure out what the next strategy is. But I really, really enjoyed getting to talk to you on this podcast. We'll definitely be staying connected with you. We're locking in right now. In October, we're going to do another Ground Up Summit. So if it works out, we'd love to have you come and speak there. We'll see how that all unfolds. Actually,
that'd be exciting.
It's my first time plugging that. We just locked down in October is when we're locking down the event space right now. So we'd love to have you out for that, and just really, really appreciate you coming on.
Well, I really liked being on this podcast. It was very fun to talk to someone who actually does construction himself, right? And so it was the conversation. I think you have really good questions, and it was exciting to be here. So thank you for having me. Awesome.
Anyone that wants to get connected with you, where can they find you?
Instagram is my best place. I'm on Facebook as well. If you look for the New Build Couple, I'm always on Instagram. So that's the best way to reach me. But I also have my website, which is www.thenewbuildcouple.com. And that's where you would find the links to my book and all that stuff.
Sweet. Don't worry. We will link it all in the show notes. And with that, we will see you on the next one, baby.